The exact moment her world shattered, Margaret Chen was holding a mop, not metaphorically, literally. She stood in the glittering lobby of Zenith, Technologies on a Tuesday morning, wringing out gray water into a bucket that had seen better days, when her phone buzzed with the message that changed everything. Her daughter's college had accepted her, full scholarship to Harvard, but there was one condition. Tuition for room and board was still their responsibility. $40,000. Money Margaret didn't have. Money she didn't know how to get. Her hands trembled so badly she nearly dropped the mop, and she had to sit down on the cold marble floor for a moment. Right there in that lobby that cost more per square foot than her entire apartment. That's where James Rothschild found her. The CEO of Zenith Technologies had just arrived for his morning meeting, his Italian leather shoes clicking against the marble like the metronome of perfection. He was talking into his Bluetooth, discussing quarterly earnings and market projections, when he nearly tripped over Margaret crouched on the floor. She scrambled up immediately, terrified, mumbling apologies. He barely looked at her, really looked at her. He just made an irritated noise and walked around her, still talking about stock options and shareholder value. Then Margaret did something foolish, something desperate. She spoke. "Excuse me, Mr. Rothschild?" Her voice came out like a whisper wrapped in uncertainty. "I'm sorry, I know you're busy, but—" She took a breath. "My daughter got into Harvard. Full academic scholarship. She's the first person in our family to go to an Ivy League school. She's brilliant, sir. Really brilliant. But we need $40,000 for her first year. And I don't know how to—" She trailed off, seeing the look on his face. It was the look of someone who had forgotten that people like Margaret existed. Rich people have a way of doing that. They forget that for some humans, $40,000 might as well be $4 million. His expression shifted from irritation to something worse, pity mixed with dismissal, the charitable sadness of the wealthy toward the poor. "That's nice," he said and laughed. Actually laughed. "But Margaret, life doesn't work that way. You can't just ask the universe for handouts. Your daughter will have to take out loans like everyone else, or maybe work her way through school. That's how the real world works." He said her name like he'd heard it from her name tag. He probably had. He didn't wait for her response before walking away, his phone already reclaiming his attention. Margaret finished her shift that day with a crushing weight in her chest. That night, she sat at her kitchen table with her daughter, Emma, and they cried together. Not dramatic tears, the quiet, exhausted tears of people who had worked hard their entire lives and still weren't quite enough. What Margaret didn't know was that her words had lodged themselves somewhere in James Rothschild's mind like a splinter he couldn't remove. He tried to ignore it. He really did. But over the next few days, something strange happened to the most powerful man in tech. He started noticing things. He noticed Margaret coming in at 5 in the morning, sometimes with dark circles under her eyes that suggested she'd been working a second job the night before. He noticed her talking to the other janitors about Emma, pride shining through her exhaustion. He noticed, really noticed, that Margaret hummed while she worked, old Chinese songs her mother had taught her, beautiful melodies that made the lobby feel less sterile somehow. One morning, James arrived early and found Margaret crying in the supply closet. She was trying to hide it, her shoulders shaking as she held onto a mop handle like a lifeline. He didn't know what possessed him to do it, but he quietly closed the door and asked her what was wrong. "Emma," Margaret said, her voice breaking. "She called me last night. She got a job at the dining hall for next year, but it's only partial. We're still short. She's taking out loans now, $20,000 in loans for her first year. My brilliant daughter is starting her life in debt because of me. Because I couldn't—" James stood there in a supply closet smelling of industrial cleaners. And something fundamental shifted in him. Not pity. Something deeper. Recognition. The recognition that Margaret's love for her daughter was worth more than anything he'd ever built. And yet the world's rules meant nothing when it came to protecting that love. What if there was another way? He heard himself say. He established a scholarship fund that day. Not in his name. In his mother's name, Catherine Rothschild, who had worked as a teacher her entire life, who had taught James that money meant nothing if you didn't use it to make other people's lives better. The scholarship was open to the children of service workers at his company. Full ride, Room, board, tuition, books, everything. When he told Margaret, she didn't believe him at first. She thought it was some kind of cruel joke. But James sat down with her in the break room, actually sat down, and explained that this fund would continue in perpetuity. He was allocating $50 million to it. He told her about his mother, about how disappointed she would have been to see the man he'd become before. Margaret had reminded him who he was supposed to be. Emma graduated from Harvard 4 years later, debt-free. She became a software engineer at a company dedicated to creating technology that served underserved communities. And James, he never became famous for the Catherine Rothschild Scholarship Fund. He didn't hold press, conferences, or seek recognition. He simply did the work. He invested in people. He became the kind of rich person who actually changed things. Margaret continued cleaning the Zenith Technologies lobby, but something had shifted. She wasn't just surviving anymore. She was part of something larger than herself. She watched other children of service workers pass through Harvard, MIT, Stanford. She watched lives transform. She watched kindness compound. Years later, at Margaret's retirement party, James stood up to speak. He didn't talk about her work ethic or her reliability. He talked about the morning she cried in a supply closet and dared to tell a powerful man that she was struggling. He talked about how that moment had changed him, had shown him that success without humanity is just accumulation, that money without purpose is just noise. Margaret, he said, his voice steady, you didn't just rebuild your daughter's life. You rebuilt mine. You reminded me that we are not the sum of our bank accounts. We are the impact we have on the people around us. We are the moments we choose to see each other, truly see each other, and decide to do something about it. Margaret, retired after 40 years of service, sat in the front row with tears streaming down her face. Not tears of sadness. Tears of the kind of joy that comes from knowing that kindness, when it's real and unreserved, creates ripples that reach farther than we could ever imagine. Her daughter sat beside her, and James's mother's scholarship fund had created an entire generation of changemakers. All because one man decided finally to really see the person holding the mop